Hello, I'm Alice Hutchinson, the owner of Birds Books, an independent bookstore in Bethel, Connecticut, and I am honored to be the host of Write America. The aim of this series is to help set the country back on a correct, productive course of freedom, justice, equality, and plain human kindness. Write America is a literary series created by author Roger Rosenblatt, featuring award-winning, nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers in readings and conversations each week about how books and art might bridge the deep divisions in our nation. Roger Rosenblatt, the esteemed writer and creator of Write America, put it this way: writing makes justice desirable, evil intelligible, grief endurable, and love possible. So welcome, and please join us every Monday night at this time as many of the most beloved and distinguished writers in the country read from their works and talk to each other and with you in an effort to bring all of us together. And if you missed last week's episode with Norman Lear and Roger Rosenblatt, or any of the previous episodes of Write America, you can go to Birds Books Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings anytime. Tonight's episode is also being recorded if you missed something, so you can go back and rewatch. Tonight, Birds Books hosts a reading by and a conversation with Nick Flynn and Pablo Medina. I'm very sorry to say that Gail Mazur had some technical issues that keep her from joining us this evening, but rest assured we'll make every effort to include her in the spring 2022 lineup of Write America. I will return after the reading and discussions to bring your questions and comments to the authors. Just to give a quick commercial, this is Gail's book, and I just wanted to give a little shout out to her new publication. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Crowdcast, I'm sure you've already discovered the chat to your right. Please continue to make comments and chat it up throughout the evening. If you have questions, however, at the bottom of the page, you will see an Ask a Question tab. That's where I'm going to look for your questions to ask the authors at the end of the episode. The third thing is the buy button. It says buy the author's books at Birds Books, and that does help support the program. So thank you very much for considering that option. Now a little bit more about our first speaker. Nick Flynn is the author of This Is the Night Our House Will Catch Fire, and 3 previous memoirs, including the Penn Joyce Osterwheel award-winning author Bullshit Night in Suck City, and 4 volumes of poetry. A professor on the creative writing faculty at the University of Houston. He lives in Brooklyn, New York. Please welcome to the screen Nick Flynn. So let me get there. Nick, where are you?
Here I am.
There you go.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm very honored to be part of this and to be reading with Pablo tonight. And I'm very sorry that Gail can't be here. And thanks everyone for being here. Thanks. I think Roger might be in the audience. This is Roger's brainchild and project, and I'm so glad to be some part of it. So I'm going to read some new poems tonight, some poems that they haven't been published anywhere. That's what I decided to do for all of you, or maybe for me. And I was thinking about a little bit about, the first one I'll read is an elegy. And the elegy is for our friends who maybe some of you know, the great poet and writer Richard McCann, who died last year. And I was in a writing group with Richard during COVID, so his spirit was sort of weaving through my words the whole time. It's called Pieta, for Richard McCann. At first, it was unacceptable. Strangers dressed in black, walking away or toward a hole in the ground, each a version of you. 700 reasons to dig holes in the earth. Some look for water, some need a fence, some for this seed, some for that body. My God, your body. When you died, I didn't cry or even think of it as change. The air didn't change. The clocks stayed lit. Trees had more trees hidden inside. I'd thought of you as dead for years. I think of everyone as dead. moving through this ghost world, walking a tree-lined path, dressed in black, the memory of a lover as strong some days as the lover beside me. As a child, so many went away, first the dogs mostly, the pets, then a distant uncle, then a neighbor, then it came from my friends. It was, at first, unacceptable. I could not keep anything alive. Yet it always seemed you were still here. I'd pick up the phone, I'd lay it back down. Sitting in my car at a rest stop in the rain, the wipers intermittent. I can't remember when it rained this hard. We're not going anywhere, not in this. Dirt is just the dead waiting to be reborn, as anything, as thought. Bring me the powder made of emptiness, the Zen koan teacher. The Zen teacher offered this koan to me. I guess he thought it would help. Unacceptable. The earth goes on forever. From your room you could set out and spend your whole life walking toward it. At some point you will stop, catch your breath, and this will become home. Inside, a mother will hold her naked son across her lap, nothing left to feed him. He is just his body now. Now she does not even remember how he came to be. All right. It's the first time reading these poems. This is called Bill Viola. Bill Viola, probably a lot of you know, is an artist. I'm most familiar with his work. He films in slow motion people walking through these sheets of water. And there's something very transformative about it for me. These long videos of people like slowly walking through or the water is coming toward them, a wall of water. Bill Viola. I think of these as, we can talk about this, maybe we'll talk about this with Pablo. I'm thinking these might be eco-poetic poems, these next series. Maybe we'll talk about that. All the rain in the world is falling, making a door you can't open. On one side of this doorway, your body, you're inside it now. On the other side, your other body, the one you've been trying to enter since you were born. To find yourself, you must cross this threshold of rain. Each drop whispers, you will not be this beautiful forever. One day you will grow so luminous, the world will not be able to contain it. As a newborn, you were held close to your father's chest to imprint his smell upon you. Where did he go? From here, you can almost make him out, the you wanted to be, though he's more a silhouette than a hand you could hold. Careful now, a hole has opened at your feet, all the rain spiraling down, nowhere else to go, like that chart on the wall in elementary school, the water cycle, how it leaps from liquid to gas to solid to teardrop to icicle to steam to waterfall to piss, an arrow connecting each. Nothing is ever lost. No one is ever unlost. Besides, it hurts to have skin, to pour a soul into. This next one is it's called the underneathedness. The underneathedness. And I take that word. I believe it's a word coined by the poet Camille T. Dungy from her book Trophic Cascade. There's a poem in here called Characteristics of Life. I just want to read the first stanza where this word appears, then I'll read my poem. The Characteristics of Life. Ask me if I speak for the snail, and I will tell you I speak for the snail. I speak of underneathedness and the welcome of mosses, of life that springs up, little lives that pull back and wait for a moment. That's Camille T. Dungy. Sounding very Whitman-esque to my ear. It's called the underneathedness. Today, I misheard the word eternity as the Trinity. I was looking at those birds falling from the sky, thousands of them, a photo of their corpses in the Times, lined up on a white sheet of paper like words. Warbler, flycatcher, swallow, eternity, trinity, die off. An airplane passes overhead, then another. The cradle is burning, creating its own weather. Vesper sparrows, violet green swallows, migratory like us, they were on their way somewhere. Maybe it was a heat cloud, maybe a fire tornado, maybe, like us, they were simply starving. From that far up, everything could fit under your wing. When did we become the underneathedness to them? There's going to be a lot of birds in this reading. There's some more. It's called Psalm, like the thing in the Bible. Psalm. Crows line the rooftops. Starlings linger in that oak on the sidewalk outside your door. Let us now admit that each is what those you love will become. Circling over that field now, riding updrafts unseen. They remind you not to forget. Some believe that the world was once filled with so much color that angels came down just to bathe in it. Some believe birds are angels, fallen from clouds, I guess, to watch over us, to help out when we can't. If this were true, then why can't we understand them? And why don't they have hands? And why is each wing hollow? And why do they sing? Some believe they only help if you pray to them. Yet as soon as you get on your knees, as soon as you say the word pray, the word comes flying back at you. Not as an echo, but as something you can hold, turn over. It has heft. It is made of something, this word, if only air or feathers. A beating heart, a black eye, a claw to your wrist. How's everyone doing? I can't hear you. Nor see you. This is called Dear Maggot. It's like a letter to a maggot. You appear like God just when needed. First you are a wing, then you are an egg, then 1,000 eggs. Then each egg opens. The creature had dragged its fur to the edge of the pond, bent its snout to drink, and never rose again. It had been injured or poisoned somehow. By the time we smell it, you already live inside. You ate your way in, starting with the eyes, with the mouth, with the asshole. Any hole is a door. The belly now swells like a circus tent. Inside, you perform your transformations, bone to marrow, muscle to dirt. In only a few hours, you will become winged again. This is called baptismal. Baptismal. A spider web is not a tool the spider uses to catch its prey. It is the spider, stretched outside itself. How far beyond our fingertips do our bodies extend? What is it we are suspended over? What holds us? Maybe we are the reason God made other people, so we could wait together, held. This one's called Catacomb. We might be leaving the realm of eco-poetics if in fact we were ever there. It's called Catacomb. This is sort of like a memoir, condensed memoir. My name comes from a man I never knew. His name comes from a man he never knew. It goes down, it goes like that all the way down. Before that, the thread is lost. It comes from the Irish word flan, meaning ruddy or red-faced. The landlord stands in his manor, looks out over his fields. No, little lord, go fuck yourself, never saw his fields. His middleman collected the rent from the peasants, the red-faced, the flan. Now I spend hours at the sink, water running over my hands. How long will it last? The window looks out at a brick wall. The sun moves tiny shadows across the grout. I can reach out and hold it. My daughter carries the same name, peasant child. I didn't know what else to do with it. That name, like a ghost, calling out from all that light. When I was her age, we needed batteries to hear music. We'd buy them by the 8-pack. We'd listen to 8 tracks. We were all on the same song. This window once looked out over a meadow. All those people we had to kill to make room. Multiply that by a city. Divide that by the amount of gold in Hispaniola. We came here to get away. We were hungry. We had to prove ourselves. The new landlord nodded in their direction. We knew what we had to do. It's hard to think how to set this right. We could move all the bones into the spare room, if we had a spare room, arrange them in a way that showed respect. What I need to do now is help my daughter with her algebra. Peggy rode her bike to the farm. Mike decided to go by car. It took Mike half an hour to get there. Peggy made the trip in 2 hours. If Mike was traveling 36 miles per hour faster than Peggy, how far is the farm? The idea is to find out what you don't know by looking at what you know. Let's start by naming what we know. Everyone is trying to get back to that farm. I'm trying to do the math of how long I've been reading. This might be the last poem. I think this will be the last poem. Yeah. That's a little cue. It's called Hive. Inside this, there is no up. It doesn't matter where we are, beside what field, inside what tree. What we build will always be this geometry. 6-sided, each chamber the exact size of a thought, big enough to sleep in. I didn't know you'd be coming today. For these few moments, head to head, we can feel our thoughts moving in and out of each other. Here's one now. We are driving across country. The country is America. There's so much I want to tell you. Too much about what's behind us, not enough about what's ahead. We cannot keep our hands off each other, as if we could mold each other's bodies into the shape of this car. This car is home. The hive is home. The road is home. Your arms are home. The flickering bulb in the hallway that needs replacement is home. Thank you.
Nick, thank you so much. Looking forward to bringing you back. Next, our next speaker is Pablo Medina. Pablo Medina has published several collections of poetry in both Spanish and English, as well as 5 novels, a memoir, and several books of translation from Spanish. A former Guggenheim Fellow, his work has appeared in journals and magazines throughout the United States, Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. His latest collection, The Foreigner's Song, New and Selected Poems, was published by Tiger Bark Press in February of 2021. He is on the faculty at the Warren Wilson MFA program for writers and lives in Williamsville, Vermont. Welcome to the screen, Pablo Medina.
Hi, thank
There you are.
Alice.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the series. Roger and Alice, this is a wonderful, wonderful series, and it's a real pleasure to read with Nick. And in fact, as I listened to his poems, I changed my whole plan around. So I'll be reading some poems from the Foreigner's Song, and also some new poems that I've not read before, just to kind of follow up on what Nick has been doing. And I'd like to start with a poem which is sort of a creation story, my own version of a creation story. It's called That Dream Again. When God made the sea, he had with him a bucket of salt and a bucket of sand. He looked into the night and fell into the space he had shaped with his huge 9-fingered hands. I will not dream that this is happening. I will turn into a bird and find what I need to fill this place. First he came upon the breath of angels making bubbles on the beach. Next, he tried the hiccups of hermits. They made the heavens sigh. Then he mixed the urine of mongrels with the spittle of saints. Waves appeared, and with them medusas and fish of all kinds, and ladies in blue swimsuits, and children splashing, and hairy men sitting under umbrellas. The wind blew over the waves and grew long dark tresses, full breasts, beautiful glands. God looked at what he made and thought, that is very good, and called it Island. The next poem is one of these shifts that I made as I listened to Nick read that poem, Pietà, the elegy for Richard McCann. I actually happen to know Richard, and we were colleagues at American University some time ago, longer perhaps than I care to remember. But I just want, this is of course nothing to do with Richard, but I liked him very much. He was a fine writer. But this is called Canticle of Uncle Carlos, and obviously it's about an uncle I had whose name was Carlos. Canticle of Uncle Carlos, who sat with a quart bottle of cheap beer under the mango tree after laying cinder blocks in the Miami heat all day, and proclaimed to his cousin Paco, I feel like a king. This poem is for him who always felt that way, even when he was dying of throat cancer and could barely speak through the tumor that was choking him. Still, he told dirty jokes to fellow patients in the common room and drank a beer I sneaked in past the nurse's station. My father called me with the news, almost crying. His brother had died, and now the tree was dying too. A mere coincidence, no doubt. No doubt we died miserably and alone in a nursing home with the radio playing a bolero of lost love, the nurses like. Uncle Carlos never took things seriously, not money or power, not prestige or good looks or bad boleros. Viva la muerte, he said. All he ever needed was a drink after a hard work day, the sun shining through the branches, and his cousin Paco, now dead as well, who marveled at the king on his throne under the mango tree. The next poem I want to read is a sort of a shift. This one I actually did intend to read back to New York, the Bronx specifically. There's a reference to Spuyten Duyvil, which is a section of the Bronx just north of Manhattan, along the Hudson. And Spuyten Duyvil is a Dutch phrase which means devil's spite, sometimes translated also as the devil's tail. American food. Once, When I lived in the Bronx, I saw a yellow butterfly float over the train tracks by the Hudson's spiky shore. I went after it, jumping carefully over the third rail, all the way to the Harlem River, where the butterfly disappeared into Manhattan. It took me an hour to get home. "You want a tuna fish sandwich?" the old lady who lived down the hall asked. And I said yes. Canned tuna I loved and had plenty over the years, as well as Chef Boyardee ravioli. Now I am without tuna fish or Boyardee or bologna on white bread with mayo, another delicacy of my youth. "I'm dying," I told that sweet lady in a dream. "What else is new?" she said, and offered a chopped liver sandwich. I bit into it and gagged. I never tasted the paste of inner organs. Under the moon, I went down to the street and walked past Stuyvesant Dival in the Bronx across the river to New Jersey, where I heard a wailing, tender voice spitting out grape after grape of purple angst. American food makes sense if sense is what you look for and you're hungry from your travel past the devil's fight and the tuna fish, the chopped liver, and the butterfly. Well, here's another sort of response to Nick. This I hadn't intended on reading, but I'll read it because he mentioned Camille Dungy's poem, which he called Whitman-esque. And so this is called St. Walt. I don't think I need to explain who St. Walt is. St. Walt. Lost today in the labyrinth of Brooklyn, I've come to stretches of lassitude and aimlessness to find you, old minotaur of sex and candles and tourniquets and wrenches. You who walked through armed with only your voice and your verve, who left behind the aura of bravado song and declension, amigo, Whitman, St. Walt, master of machine and wheel, eater of bull testicles and mockingbird tongues, ubiquitous master, long-fingered handler of the moon, slave of compassion. Wave after wave crest in your tongue of wind and water, and your chest like a drum of sorrow. Blackbirds of thought fly in your mind, darkening day. The streets of your Brooklyn have taken up your manly smell, your brash American inflection, your roar of an animal in the wild, your eye of an eagle hunting, your garbage trucks and taxis, your vending machines, oil slicks, sidewalks splotched with chewing gum, your homeless, toothless, wireless love of all. I saw you strolling down the avenue, and you were king and pauper, hater of knives and whimpers, lusting after a young boy in makeup and a rough man in leather and a woman in high heels and fur coat, her lips pursed and gleaming on your man-hard flesh. The night was storm, ocean of clouds to the west, thunder lighting the future at the end of self. Amigo of the lame and the blind, saint of the wheelchair, of the broken-hearted, of the two girls dancing the tango in a dim-lit bar. Tell them there's no triumph of defeat, no border between night and day, no understanding who they are, but a slow movement like their bodies move, a slow tide like their bodies tide, a late spring bursting with 10,000 blooms. The next poem I want to read is sort of a half translation, more of an adaptation of a poem by Du Fu, the 8th century Chinese poet. And it's called The River of Peach Trees. Spring returns to the river of peach trees. Du Fu spoke about, already old and sick on his way south after many years of exile. My sail is a white cloud surrounded by forests. When I think of my old friends, I see featureless faces, sick with bitterness. I look north one last time. No one remembers my tired verses. There was a time when I was very heavily influenced by Spanish poets of the Golden Age, and I started writing sonnet-like contraptions that were responses to the sonnets of Quevedo and Góngora and all those people that influenced me so much. So here's one. It's called My Mother Dreams Me. My mother dreams me and I wake. She wakes, I dream. She is alive. She rises with the sun as always when I sleep. Her ashes mingle in my bed. She seems to whisper to the wind. My mother is awake, asleep. Who knows? She roams the sea. She spills into the dark like salt. How is it that she dreams? How is it that I wake? My mother sings without remembering. She is the edge of rest, the glow of doom, the grapes I ate the day she died. The days of glory. As a boy, I dreamed of girls dancing naked in their bedrooms. Later, I wanted to know how their nipples tasted. Marzipan, strawberry, chocolate fire. Later still, I was slave to their shadows and their soft ways and their sea moans and the thicket of wildness under their skirts. In the city now, tied to the mast of marriage, I taste fresh hay. I taste a salty moral. I see a woman crossing Fifth Avenue, immaculate, indelible, looking very much like my mother. The long neck of the avenue swallows the days of glory, the days of desire. I want to read a couple of very short Spanish poems. I do write in Spanish, and whenever I can, usually when I travel to Spanish-speaking countries and spend time there. Of course, I haven't done it in over a year because of the pandemic, so I long to get back there. I'll read they're very brief. I'll read 2 or 3 of them just to, well, because I want to, and I want you to listen. If you don't know the language, I want you to listen to the rhythms of it. Because again, it's what really underlies much of my own work in English. El tiempo de la semilla. Luego del río, luego del largo camino, cae la tarde, como cae la nieve y cubre la montaña. Cae la tregua sobre los días. Cae, ya lo sé, el tiempo en la semilla. Los pájaros negros. Yo era niño colmado de sueños, buscaba el amor en la dama de los baños. Esa fue la mejor vida. Ya la dama ha muerto y no hay baño ni sueño, sino un bosque nevado y al fondo una pradera azul y unos pájaros negros. El abejón. Quisiera abrir el día y chupar el néctar de tus ojos. Quisiera ver qué hacen tus manos cuando estás sola y con deseo. Cómo arreglas la sábana que cae sobre tu cuerpo y lo envuelve en el sosiego. Quisiera ser algo que buscaste y solo ahora has encontrado. So that's a little brief interlude in Spanish. That takes me to I've been translating the work of the Cuban poet Roberto Padilla, and I just wanted to read one of the translations I worked on recently. So here it is, Difficult Times. They asked for that man's time so that he could join it to history's time. They asked for his hands, because in difficult times there is nothing better than a pair of hands. They asked for his eyes, that sometimes is filled with tears, to consider the bright side, especially the bright side of life. Since to see horror, only one astonished eye is enough. They asked for his dry, cracked lips to affirm, and with each affirmation build a dream, the loftiest dream. They asked for his hard, knotted legs, his old, wandering legs, because in difficult times there is nothing better than a pair of legs for the construction trades or for the trenches. They asked for the forest that nourished him as a child with its obedient trees. They asked for his breast, the heart, the shoulders. They told him that it was all absolutely necessary. Afterwards, they explained that his offerings would be in vain without giving up his tongue, because in difficult times, nothing is as useful for chasing away hatred and lies. And finally, they asked that please he keep moving, because in difficult times, that is, no doubt, the definitive proof. Again, Roberto Padilla, a great Cuban poet. The subject of the Padilla affair back in 1971. I'm not going to get into that. This is the last poem. It's another canticle called The Gift. I am a child of the sea, but I've always lived by rivers. They're never the same. When the moon is full, I stop in wonder. When winter comes, I crawl in my cave. I used to love the city, its buildings and clamor. Now I'd rather walk in the woods and bathe in the breath of trees. The watch on my wrist reminds me I will end where I began. Time is a gift unearned. I have a dog named Diego who hates when I leave the house, afraid I'll never return. There is no comforting him. Just now, he shook off a thought he didn't like. He learned that trick from me. My wife sings in the morning and tries to get me to dance. Last winter, we ran naked through the falling snow. I feel blessed there are things I know and many more that I don't. My dearest friends live far away. I long for them as I long for comfortable shoes. My son has become a man. He looks like my father and acts like me sometimes. They will come, and sleep is a seed, and the seed will grow in ways I do not understand. Thank you.
Pablo, thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Gorgeous.
I loved your
Yeah.
new work.
Yeah. So let's talk.
All right,
Talk.
let's talk.
I could ask you a question. I mean, jump in with something. Like I love that you read in Spanish. I really, what you said was so important, just about the, whether anyone understood the language or not. Whoever, I'm sure a lot of folks did, and I know some Spanish. I know cafe Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. I know
but,
it well too, having spent many a time in a cafe.
but the music of it though, I listen to often on earbuds. I have a friend of mine turned me on to recordings of Lorca reading his poems.
Oh
And,
yes, yeah.
and and I just sort of would listen to him. I would sort of ride around the city on my bike, listening to this, like and sort of catching pieces of language. Mostly it's the rhythm, it's the sound of it, though.
Right,
And,
right, yeah,
you know,
yep, yeah. And his poetry is so rhythmical, so steeped in Spanish, in the Spanish ballad tradition. Until he gets to Poet of New York. Poet of New York is just an explosion of language. It's just.
Which is what you translated that, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah. Maybe the definitive translation, perhaps.
Well, I don't know if it's definitive or not.
Some claim,
some claim, right? Mm-hmm.
Some claim it is. Yeah.
I'm glad you remembered that. That's.
Yeah.
It's funny. I find in your work sort of a warmth that is not it's not always evident in a lot of the work of poets. I think it's very human poetry, and I was particularly taken by that poem Pietà. That I just I found so moving, moving enough that it led me to kind of respond in a way to it.
No, I love that you did that. I love that you sort of brought up the response, and your response was your canticle for Uncle Carlos, and came right after the first one. The first one seemed like it was in conversation with my work. Also, that first poem with God coming in, God made the sea, the Genesis poem, where God sort of creates the world and pulls it together. Because for some reason, I'm not sure what it is, but I've always had this thing with this. I wasn't raised Catholic, and I don't really understand a lot of what I don't really understand, like Pietà or like baptismal, like all the deeper resonance of those things. I like them. I like them almost as an outsider, almost as like a foreigner, like you say.
Yeah, right. But the thing is that Pietà has become a sort of a cultural term to refer to extreme grief and tenderness. The moment you said that, exactly. I remembered Michelangelo's Pietà with Mary holding her dead son, and that sort of set me up for the poem.
That poem for me was like.
What I'm saying is it had nothing to do with the religion and everything to do with grief and tenderness and emotion.
I think that's what I get out of it. So how it bleeds into the larger culture. The idea of in all those terms, and I mean they have I don't understand the deeper significance specifically to the culture.
Right.
But with that larger thing, we had that line in it. They had that line in it though. I thought of you as dead for years, which is very uncomfortable for me to say. It's very uncomfortable to say, but I thought of everyone as dead.
That was really a strange line,
it's a strange line, yeah.
Yeah. What did you have in mind when you?
Well, for an elegy, it's a strange line for an elegy. Right. Like to have it in an elegy, to have that line, because it's not like. But in some ways, I mean, Richard was, he was a transplant recipient. He had a liver transplant.
Right.
20, and he lived like much longer than was expected. He had like many years, which is a gift, a huge gift.
Right.
So but just that thing, it was sort of like, because I was with him when he got the transplant. Like I stayed with him for a week when he was recovering, and that idea of like someone who suddenly came out and then had another quarter of a century, from this huge gift of a liver coming into his life. So there's something about that, but it's a strange thing to put in. So it's one of those things when I don't know if you do this when you're writing, but sometimes a phrase will come into my mind that seems completely inappropriate or will seem not quite right, and the energy around that is enough for me to include it.
Absolutely. Like yes, you're right. I'm actually giving myself the freedom and the license to be able to do that more and more, without explaining exactly to myself why that line is there and whether it should or shouldn't be there. it's both. When you look at it again, when you go back to it, you realize, yes, of course it should be there. It has a certain resonance to
I think
what comes before and what follows.
I think that initial like embarrassment or shame or something has a lot of energy in it and can sort of there's something underneath it. I was thinking that with your line from the I forget what it is. I just wrote marriage poem, like they're tied to the mast of marriage.
Oh yeah.
That to me has a similar energy to that. I thought of you as dead for years, like sort of a thing that a thing one wouldn't say, you know. It's like
But yes, it's there. It's there for a reason. Yeah. Listen, I wanted to have you maybe talk a little bit more about ecopoetics and how you see that and how what is it? What's the connection between the poetics and the
I haven't. My friend Marie Howe, you probably know Marie also.
Yes,
you know Marie,
of course.
Marie Howe. Yeah, Marie has been teaching ecopoetics for the last few years at Sarah Lawrence. She teaches it in a workshop there, and she has me come in because I have a book that I wrote a while ago. My second book of poems was called Blind Huber, which is it all takes place around bees. It's all a study of bees, and I thought of it as I wrote it before there was this thing called ecopoetics, I think, and now like people read it like that. But now I sort of have this feeling like almost every poem now, maybe it's just like at this moment for me at least in the urgency, the natural world sort of comes into the poems in a certain way that. With as much urgency as like my internal landscape, like whatever's happening out in the world and has as much energy and as much importance as anything else. So, lines like this, the underneathedness. Like that one was the most particularly because her Camille's book is very much that,
right?
A Trophic Cascade, and. Being influenced by that and writing, I was looking at those birds falling from the sky, thousands of them, photos of their corpses in the Times, and this idea of, and then the cradle is burning, creating its own weather. Just that we're sort of, the fires that are happening now all around the country and probably around the world right now. It seems like hard not to have it come into the poem, like in some way. It seems like it's almost
it's unavoidable.
So maybe all the poems we're going to write from now on are in some way.
Well, I have been writing, especially surrounded by nature as I am for the first time in my life. I've always been a city person, and here I am in Vermont, a very rural state. I was going to say pastoral, but I think that's not quite accurate. It's more rural than anything, and wild in unexpected ways. And as you say, it's sort of a release of yourself to enter that theme and those what surrounds you, and have what's in you kind of melt into what is around you. And I think that requires something I never had before moving here, and that's a very deep respect for nature that sort of defies any sort of attempt at understanding it. Because at the moment you try to understand nature in your little human self, you try to colonize it. Nature doesn't work that way.
I love the knowledge that we have, the seeming knowledge we have. I just read today, for I don't know how many decades now, we've had this concept of black holes, and then there's this scientist today, they just said like there's no such thing as black holes. They're planets that are made of dark energy, and that to me is just fascinating. Just this whole how we can look at something for, like you're just saying, like look at something forever, but it's beyond comprehension. I think that's why, like with your first poem, with the Genesis poem, with God.
The creation story about the island.
When God made the sea
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just that's like, I think that, nature and God sort of, they sort of, that's where they sort of line up together. That both are incomprehensible. There's you can't really,
Right.
think of it, but you can look at it closely. You can look very. I think eco-poetics is to look very closely outside of your ego as much as possible at what is happening in the world, what's happening around you, outside yourself, and outside the
Yeah. Anyway.
yeah.
So, I don't. Alice, are you there? Can you hear us?
I was just coming back. You read my mind. We do have some questions, and I do want to get the chance to answer them for people. So thank you so much for shouting out my name. I have a question here. The first one is, when you two write, what are your processes for structuring your poetry? Is it formal, intuitive, structured in editing, etc.?
You want to take that, Nick?
Yeah, I could start out with it. I think it's different. Like right now, like I'll just say a little something about what I'm working on now. The poems that I just read are coming out of. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to turn my computer for a second and show you. I have these collages on my wall that I make. I have this collage process. I think you can see those on the wall there, and they sort of go up, and there's a whole series of them. And all these poems have come from a collage. Each one has come from a collage. So I make these collages, and then I sort of sit and give myself a practice to write about. It's almost that observing thing, like just writing about what is in the collage, what's there. And that gives it the structure. That gives the structure of the piece. And then in revision, it falls apart. Like it goes away. It might go in a whole other direction into some other place. But the beginning is always for me from like a meditative place, and just trying to sort of like take in some sort of an image. The collages are very sort of complicated. There's a lot of things going on in them, and wherever my attention goes to is what ends up in the page. And so I sort of trust that. That's sort of the intuitive part of it, and then later comes sort of how to contain it into some shape. I hope that answers your question somewhat. I think all I see is a B for your name, but thank you, B, for asking. Do you want to try that one?
Yeah, well,
Pablo?
I was just reading all the comments here.
Oops.
I
didn't know you all could see this, that I do as well.
Yeah, and I saw this one, Alice, about switching earbuds. One of them fell out. I don't know if that was.
That's okay.
Creative.
No.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, yes, I frankly don't have any kind of system for writing poems. It varies from day to day, and sometimes it's the form of the poem that catches me. Sometimes it's just a phrase or an idea. For example, that Dream Again, the creation poem, the first thing that came into my head, it was a question: how did God create hairy men sitting in the beach? And that sort of led me back into the beginning, when God begins to make the world, and then I had to fill in the blanks and get to the hairy man. So that was one way. I'm always involved in a process of translation. Well, I'm translating myself from Spanish to English. Spanish is my first language. And so that too has a lot to do with, I say that I say to myself that I define myself in Spanish, but I manifest myself in English. And that process is something that is constant in my work. How to say things and how to bring myself into the English language in a way that reflects both me and the world that surrounds me. So that's another way.
So I have a follow-up question to your statement. If you write your poetry in Spanish and then you translate it into English,
No, and
does the
sometimes I
music...
write it in Spanish and it remains in Spanish, but sometimes the thoughts come in Spanish, but they manifest themselves in English.
I think the question is what happens with the musicality in each different language, because there's so much musicality in poetry.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and each language has its own particular music, and it's untranslatable. Music is in poetry is untranslatable. So you have to find the music that corresponds to the music in one language. And make a connection that way. So it's a sort of a bridge you make, a musical bridge, but so the two meet together. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. I'm struggling here because it's
okay.
very hard to explain.
I do have another question. It's actually one Roger brought up in one of our other episodes, and I'd really like to ask the two of you. What are the grounds where poetry and prose meet?
Nick, you take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking back to what Pablo was saying. So many things you were saying too. Like I loved when you did the Genesis poem. Like you start out with that idea of the hairy man at the beach, and then you sort of work backward to the thing. But then, like I just love the beginning of that, where it's like he has a bucket of salt. He goes to the water with a bucket of salt, like this, like really trying to sort of contain it in this like this image, this God walking with a bucket. So where does like poetry and prose meet? I think that it's, I think that the prose that most moves me is, I mean, I like that. It's funny, like poetry is sort of one of the least respected art forms in some ways in America. At least monetarily, and yet, if you say something is poetic, it's a high compliment. So I admire prose that uses the tools of poetry, that uses like all the force, like Pablo was just saying, like the music and rhythm and just these sonic elements, to think about the language as a material that you're sort of, it's not just to convey information, but it's actually like the pleasure of the syntax and the diction and the even the using all the tools of poetry, like in prose, is the prose that I really admire and really sort of return to. Yeah. So that's what makes it. That's what makes great prose, I'd say.
Right, and it can almost be great prose can be scanned. And I one of the books I read all the time is Moby Dick, and when you look at those sentences and study them, you can actually scan them. They're so musical, and yet it's prose. The basic unit there is a sentence, as opposed to a line, but it's still very, very, very musical and very beautiful. Not all of it can be scanned.
And that's a book that made, like, I spent some time in Latin America, and that's one of the books that makes it down there, and part for that reason. Like, I find that on most people's, like, bookshelves, that and Whitman and Joyce were the books I find, like, I don't know if that's true, but I saw those in many houses that I went to when I was traveling around down there. Those were the people that people would read, and I think because of that, because of the music in the prose. Yeah.
And they translate well precisely because of that musical quality that they have. Those books. Yeah. I just answered your question. What book would I like to have written?
Yes, what book have you read that you wish you had written? And that was my next question, and you just headed off at the pass right there. Okay, Nick, it's your turn.
I would think, like, I was thinking of a couple plays. Like Beckett is always someone I return to, Samuel Beckett, and so I just love, some like Crap/Tape, just how the meta level of that, of sort of circling around each other. But there's also a contemporary writer, Annie Baker. I don't know if you. She has a collection of plays called the Vermont Plays, And there's a play in that called Aliens. And I read it. My daughter and I, when she was about 7, every morning we'd wake up and just read the whole play to each other. We'd just go back and forth and read this play. And she, being 7, like she wanted to hear it like over and over again. I got quite a lot of joy out of like, I'd seen the play performed, and I got quite a lot of joy about it, seeing that. So Annie Baker and Beckett, I'd love to like sort of inhabit their minds for a while.
Well, I have one last question now. What's on your to-be-read list?
I have next to my bed. I have, which is the most recent thing. I have Rebecca Solnit's new book, the Orwell's Roses. I'm very interested in see what I started it. And I think she's a beautiful writer. And I started it just like last night. Her take on sort of diving deeply into Orwell and his place and his. But it's like an eco-poetics book too, because it's all about. It turns out that he was very big into like sort of like cultivation and planting, and she sort of goes into that. So it's very specific about that. So it's sort of her turn into eco-poetics, I think.
Very timely. That just came out.
Just came out, yeah.
Pablo?
Well, the next book I'm going to have it right here. I haven't opened it yet. I just got it. It's Sergio Pitol, Mexican writer, Trilogía de la Memoria, the Trilogy of Memory. I think it was just translated into English. And so I can't wait to dig into this. It's 3 novels in one, in a thick book. But sometimes I like thick books. They take me away. So I'm really looking forward. He won the Cervantes Prize a few years ago, which is the highest, most important prize in Spanish language literature. So that's what I have next.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a genuine pleasure. Thank you both for attending tonight. I'm going to minimize both of you, and I'm going to say goodnight. To all of you who have attended, I want to thank Nick and Pablo for participating in Write America.
Thank you.
To everyone who tuned in tonight, and thank you to Roger Rosenblatt for creating such a great series to look forward to each Monday evening. We do have signed books of both these authors in the store, and I hope to see you next week, where we will host readings from Carl Phillips, Kai Coggan, and Lloyd Schwartz. Good night, folks, and thank you for joining us.